My name wasn't on the name tag, not Margot Harrison, not grandmother of the bride, not even Mrs. Harrison. It said in perfect gold cursive, the old lady who's paying for everything. That's it. No title, no dignity, just a punchline, pinned to my chest like a scarlet letter, in front of 200 wedding guests. And here's the thing, it wasn't a mistake, it was a message, and I understood it loud and clear. Before I go on, let me ask you something. Have you ever been made to feel invisible, like your worth only exists in the zeros on your checkbook, not the love in your heart or the years you've given? If you have, if you've ever been the one paying for everything and still treated like nothing, comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Let me know this story has reached someone who understands, because this story deserves to be heard. Back to the ballroom. The wedding staff handed me the name tag with a smile as if it were a corsage. I didn't blink. Not at first. My fingers just hovered over the silk of my dress, the one I'd picked that morning, because Robert, my late husband, had always said it brought out the blue in my eyes. I wore the pearl hair clip he gave me on our last anniversary, and a hint of the perfume I hadn't touched since he passed 3 years ago. I looked in the mirror that morning and whispered, "You'd be proud of me today, Robert." And now this. I held the tag like it was something rotting in my hand. The girl at the welcome table chirped, "Isn't it adorable? Your son and daughter-in-law said it would be funny." Funny. I smiled or tried to. Then I pinned the tag to my chest. Not because I accepted it, but I wanted to see how far they were willing to go. And believe me, they went far. Lila's wedding was exactly what they wanted: a spectacle. Floating orchids, a 6-tier gold-dusted cake, violinists from New York. Guests seated beneath chandeliers like extras in a royal drama. And it was all paid for. By me. Every flower, every bite, every song. I paid for it not because I was wealthy, but because I believed in family. Because I believed weddings were sacred. Because I believed my granddaughter still saw me as something more than this. But I was wrong. I stood at the bar swirling soda water in a glass too heavy for my wrist, trying to ignore the stares. But then I heard it. Laughter. From behind me. "Did you see her name tag?" "She's their ATM," one voice said, barely stifling a giggle. I heard Tina came up with it. Said it would be a cute touch. ATM. That word sliced deeper than the others. I turned away, pretending to admire the hors d'oeuvres, tiny quiches no one ate. That's when I heard my son, Mom Brady, waving me over like he was inviting someone to join his table at the club. I approached with the practiced steps of a woman raised to be polite, to not cause a scene. "This is my mom," he announced to the group. "Our walking bank account." He laughed. So did Tina, my daughter-in-law, in the designer gown I'd paid for just 6 weeks earlier. The couple in front of me, the Andersons' old business acquaintances of Robert, looked mortified. "Margot Harrison," I said, extending my hand, my voice even. "Robert's widow." Later, when the Andersons walked away, I pulled Brady aside. "What is this?" I asked, gesturing to the tag. He shrugged. "It's just a joke, Mom. Don't be so sensitive. It's humiliating." "Oh, come on. Everyone knows you're the generous one. You're the reason all this is happening." Tina joined us a moment later, smiling with pride. "There you are, Margot. We've been showing you off all evening. Everyone should know who made today possible." She winked. And then they were gone. Laughing, mingling, proud of the little insult they dressed up in calligraphy. That night I sat alone in the powder room. The lighting was soft. The perfume in the air is floral and expensive. I held the tag in my lap, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Not for the money, not for the insult, but I realized something bone deep and horrifying. They didn't see me. They saw a purse that walked and smiled and signed checks, a woman who could pay, but didn't need love, or dignity, or kindness. Then a knock. "Mrs. Harrison, Margot." I opened the door. It was Caleb Morse, Robert's old attorney. He looked different, troubled, serious. I saw the name tag, he said, lowering his voice. And I think it's time you saw this. From the inside pocket of his suit, he pulled out an envelope. My name, in Robert's handwriting. I felt the room tilt slightly. Caleb met my eyes. It's a private clause your husband added to his will, something he asked me to keep, in case it was ever needed. Inside was a letter, and one line of legal prose that made my hands go cold. The envelope shook in my hands. It was cream-colored, heavy, and sealed in wax, the kind of envelope you don't open lightly. My name was written across the front in Robert's handwriting, still strong, still precise, even after the chemo had taken so much from him. Caleb waited. He said nothing. He didn't have to. I stepped into a quiet corner of the hotel hallway and broke the seal. Inside were two pieces of paper. One was a letter, the other a legal amendment, a codicil. I'd heard the word before once years ago during one of Robert's conversations with Caleb over coffee. I hadn't paid attention then. I did now. To my wife Margot, the letter began. If you are reading this, something I feared has come to pass. My throat tightened. I always believed that after I was gone, our family would gather around you, not just out of tradition, but out of love. That they would care for you, respect you, and protect you. But just in case I was wrong, this is your shield. I glanced down at the second page. The legal language was clear, shockingly so. Any descendant, any who publicly humiliated me, who attempted to control or manipulate my living conditions or finances without consent, would forfeit their inheritance entirely. And not just their share, but any influence over how the estate was managed during my lifetime. I stared at the text. It was as if Robert were standing behind me again. Not with a hug, but with a sword. Not just offering protection, but handing me a line in the sand. Caleb cleared his throat. Robert signed it last week. I advised him that it was unorthodox. I whispered, "Why didn't he tell me he didn't want you to live with suspicion?" Caleb replied, "He hoped you'd never need it. He wanted them to love you freely, not out of fear." I pressed the letter to my chest, and for the first time that night, I felt something other than shame. I felt clarity. That evening back at home, I laid the tag on my kitchen table. The old lady who's paying for everything. It sat beside my teacup, like a curse someone had cast, with a smirk and a Sharpie. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled out a small storage box from the hallway closet, filled with financial records, bank printouts, and checks I'd written over the past few years. I began to read, to tally, to remember. It started after Robert died. 6 months in, Brady and Tina invited me to dinner, just the three of us. I thought it was kindness. In hindsight, it was a strategy. They asked about my health, shared a toast to Robert, and then Brady had looked at me over dessert and said, "Mom, our kitchen is falling apart. We're just updating a few things. But it's tight with college savings and all." We'd never ask, but that night I wrote a check for $30,000. And then it never stopped. The kitchen update turned into a full renovation. Then came the tuition. Then the cars for the kids. The family vacations that I paid for and was invited to as a bonus. None of it ever felt like theft. It felt like duty, like being supportive. Until now. I sat cross-legged on the floor, financial statements fanned out around me, like the pages of a diary I'd never meant to write. 3 years. Nearly $250,000. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger, not yet. Just a quiet, frozen awareness that I had been living in a house with broken windows for years and only just realized the cold. The next morning my phone rang. It was Tina. "Margot, you've been hard to reach. I tried your cell. I hadn't checked it since the wedding. It was still in my clutch." "Yes, I'm here," I said softly. "Wasn't the wedding beautiful?" she gushed. "Lila and Mark are so grateful. None of it would have been possible without you." I stared at the 10 on the table. Tina's voice shifted just slightly. That's partly why I'm calling. Mark's parents were supposed to cover the honeymoon, but something fell through with his dad's business. They're devastated. Here it comes. We were wondering. Bali is still their dream. 2 weeks. Beachfront. You'd be saving them. I paused. For once, I didn't reach for my checkbook. I'll think about it, I said. Tina hesitated. Well, they need to book soon to lock in prices, I understand. I'll let you know tomorrow. And I hung up. I didn't make tea. I didn't scroll my phone. I just sat there with the cautionary clause beside me, a silent agreement between the woman I was and the woman I was becoming. A soft knock at the door broke the quiet. Evan, my grandson, 21 years old, lanky, awkward in his skin, but with Robert's eyes, the same eyes that saw people. Are you okay, Grandma? He asked as I let him in. I'm fine, just a little tired. I wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened at the wedding. The name tag, the way people talked about you. It wasn't right. You noticed? Of course I noticed. He looked down. I should have said something. I touched his hand. You're saying it now. That matters. He looked up. There's more. I didn't know if I should tell you. What is it? Last week I overheard Mom and Dad. They were talking about this house, saying it's too big for you. Maybe it's time you downsized. That they'd help you move into some retirement community. Said the market's hot. You could get a great deal. And then they'd help manage what's left. I nodded slowly, my heart strangely still. That was the moment the shift happened. Not rage, not pain, but the final click of something long jammed in place. I set the teapot down, sat across from Evan. I think I said I've seen enough. He looked confused. What do you mean? I mean it's time for a few changes. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. There's a strange kind of silence that comes when you finally stop pretending you didn't see it. When you stop filling in the blanks with excuses. When you realize they were never whispering, you just didn't want to hear. 2 days after the wedding, Brady and Tina invited me to brunch at the Red Birch Country Club. It was supposed to be a family thank you gathering. More likely, it was the next chapter in their soft campaign to separate me from my home and my choices. I almost declined. But then I remembered what Robert used to say, never leave the table until you've seen how they play the last card. So I went. The dining room at Red Birch was exactly what you'd expect from a place where members wear pastel and tip with eye contact. As I walked in, Tina air-kissed my cheek. You look refreshed, Margot, she said as if surprised. I was wearing a cream pantsuit Robert had once called regal. No pearls this time, just a watch and a will. They had seated me at the far end of the head table between Mark's parents, whom I barely knew. Brady raised his mimosa. To Mom, who made all of this possible. Scattered applause followed. Empty. Obligatory. Then Tina stood. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind you only use when delivering something rotten with a ribbon. And now a special surprise, she announced. We're thrilled to share that Margot will be sending Lila and Mark to Bali for their dream honeymoon. There it was. The twist of the knife. I hadn't agreed to that. I hadn't even followed up on Tina's call. I blinked. The applause had started. Lila looked confused. Mark looked uncomfortable. Brady leaned toward me with a stage whisper. Don't make a scene. We've already told them they can book it. I set my coffee cup down. This is the first I'm hearing of it, I said loud enough for the table. A silence settled like fog. Tina gave an awkward laugh. Remember, you said you'd think about it? Yes, I said. And I'm still thinking. There was no yelling, no slammed fists. But the air shifted. Even Lila, sweet naive Lila, began to understand that perhaps the endless well she knew as Grandma wasn't bottomless, and maybe never had been. Brady reached for my arm. His grip was tight. A warning. Mom, stop it. You're embarrassing us. I turned to him slowly, deliberately, and said, "No, Brady. You've embarrassed yourselves." Then I stood. "Lila, Mark, I wish you both joy sincerely, but if I'm to contribute to anything further, I'll speak with you privately. As adults. Not props in a staged announcement." I nodded to the rest of the table. "Please enjoy your brunch." Then I walked out. Evan followed me into the lobby. "You okay to drive?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. "Just shaken." He paused. "You should be proud of yourself." That took courage. I looked at him. Looked. And in that moment I saw the future of our family not in Brady's hands, but in Evan's. Not in entitlement, but in quiet loyalty. "Would you like to come to dinner tonight?" I asked, my voice steadier than it had been in weeks. He smiled. "I'd love that." That evening, over roasted chicken and steamed carrots, I told Evan everything. The letter, the clause, the money, the house. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask for anything. He just listened. And when I finished, he said softly, "I think they've been planning this since Grandpa passed. But I also think they never imagined you'd wake up." Then came the knock at the door. "Brady." "Of course. I told Evan you can stay. This isn't a secret anymore." Brady walked in like a man whose control was slipping, which to be fair it was. "What the hell was that today, Mom?" he hissed. "You made us look insane. You did that yourself," I said. He turned to Evan. "What are you doing here, having dinner with Grandma? Something you should try. Without asking for money." Brady's face darkened. "This is between your mother and me." "No," I said. "It's not. If you have something to say it where it can be heard." He paced like a caged animal, then spun toward me. "You've been poisoning Evan against us." "No, Evan has eyes, and ears, and a memory." Then he did the one thing I didn't expect. He shifted his tone, became the concerned son. "Mom, listen. You've always depended on Dad, then on me. Maybe you're not seeing things anymore. That's why we want to talk about power of attorney." I didn't let him finish. "I am 65, Brady. Not senile, not confused, and not giving you control." His face fell. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "For the first time in years, I'm not." He stormed out. Didn't even close the door behind him. Evan helped me with the dishes. Neither of us said much. We didn't need to. Something had shifted. Later that night, I called Caleb. "I'm ready," I said. "It's time to understand everything." 3 hours later, I sat across from Caleb Morse in his office. Dark wood, neutral carpet, a single painting of a mountain lake behind him. Robert used to call it the most dangerous room in town. He wasn't wrong. Caleb slid a thick folder across the desk toward me. "This," he said, "is the full breakdown of Robert's estate." I opened it, and my breath caught. We had lived comfortably, yes. But what I saw here wasn't comfort. It was a legacy. Robert hadn't just built a nest egg, he'd constructed a quiet fortress. Multiple properties, conservative investments, equity in 3 private companies. His plan had never been just for retirement. It was for protection. For me. Caleb's voice softened. "Robert didn't want you to know everything while he was alive. He feared it would become a burden." I looked at him. He feared they would come for me the moment he was gone. Caleb didn't respond. He didn't need to. Then we turned to the cautery. The clause, legally binding, activated by humiliation, coercion, or manipulation. Any descendant. And applicable the moment I choose to invoke it. "Would you like to file it now?" Caleb asked. I paused. "No," I said. "Not yet." Here's what I'd learned over decades of marriage to a man who built empires from nothing. You don't fight rats by screaming. You let them show you where they run when the lights come on. Brady and Tina had operated in the dark for years, but now I'd lit a match, and I wanted to see how far the shadows went. When I returned home, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I cleaned out the guest room. Fresh sheets, a lamp, space. It wasn't for the company. It was symbolic. A clearing of the clutter, a signal that I was making room, not for people, but for control. Then I opened my laptop, searched for something I hadn't dared look at since Robert died: adult learning classes, painting, French language, basic coding. I registered for all three, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I was remembering what it meant to be someone outside of Mother Widow Bank. Just Margot. The next morning, I ignored 2 missed calls from Tina. The third came with a voicemail. "Hi Margot, just checking in. Lila is trying to book Bali and says she hasn't heard back from you. Also, Brady mentioned you might want to talk about the house soon. It is too big for one person. Anyway, we're thinking Sunday dinner, just us to clear the air." I deleted it, without listening to the end. Instead, I wrote a check. A modest one. Not to Brady, not to Tina, but to Lila and Mark, addressed directly to them, with a handwritten card tucked inside. "Wishing you happiness. Here's a little something toward your honeymoon. May you build your life with independence and love. No amount listed, no strings, but no Bali either. Let them adjust." That afternoon, I met Evan for coffee near campus. He was reviewing a draft of his business plan for a bookstore cafe, a dream he'd shelved out of practicality. "Walk me through the budget," I said, and handed him a pen. He blinked. "Seriously?" "You've got the spine," I said. "You just need a shelf to stand on." That evening, I received a text from Brady: "Need to talk. Face to face." I didn't reply. 3 days passed. Then came Sunday. I was in the garden trimming back the roses when I heard the doorbell. Brady, Tina, and to my surprise, Lila and Mark. They were holding takeout, smile packages, peacemaking postures. But their eyes were scanning the foyer, the kitchen counters, the art on the walls, checking for clues, for leverage. I kept my voice pleasant. "Come in." Dinner was strained. Small talk, questions about classes, about Evan. Then Tina dropped it. "So, we were thinking maybe it's time to discuss a plan for your property. You know, just in case. The market's incredible. And with you on your own, I'm not on my own," I said, slicing into the roast. "A beat." Brady cleared his throat. "We're not saying anything needs to happen now. But you've got a big house. It's a lot to maintain." I smiled. "It's not as big as you think." After dessert, as they helped me clean up, Lila lingered. "I saw the check," she said softly. "Thank you." "You're welcome." She hesitated. I should have said something at the wedding. About the name tag. I was just caught up." I looked at her, and for a moment, I saw the girl I used to braid hair for in summer, who used to call me her secret weapon. "You still have time," I said, "to decide who you want to be in this family." She blinked, then nodded. "I will." After they left, Evan texted me. "You good? Want me to swing by?" "I'm good," I replied. "I think the performance is beginning. Now we see what parts they've rehearsed." That night, I made a new folder on my computer. Reclaiming. Inside it, I saved a scanned copy of the codicil, Evan's business plan, my updated draft will, a photo of me in the garden smiling, shears in hand. It was the first time in years I'd seen myself and thought, that woman looks free. My 66th birthday fell on a Tuesday. Evan insisted on hosting a small dinner, just family, he said. But I knew better. He wanted them to remember whose house this was. We kept it simple: roast chicken, scalloped potatoes, and carrot cake I made that morning. I wore a crimson dress I hadn't worn since Robert's retirement party, a dress he once said made me look like I ran the world. Maybe I did. At least this world. My world. Brady and Tina arrived first. Their smiles were smooth. Their arms were full of grocery store flowers and a bottle of cheap red. "Happy birthday, Mom," Brady said, pressing a kiss to my cheek like a politician on the campaign trail. Tina's eyes scanned the room. "Wow, you've really changed things." "Yes," I said simply. "I have." Lila and Mark came next, followed by Caleb Morse and his wife, longtime family friends. I had invited them with quiet precision. Tonight wasn't just dinner, it was witnessing. We ate, we laughed, or rather, we allowed laughter to fill the gaps between tensions. Michael spoke about the bookstore. Caleb praised his ambition. Lila played with her wedding ring. And I waited. I didn't have to wait long. As I began slicing the birthday cake, Brady cleared his throat. Tina placed her wineglass down like she was cueing a scene. "There's something we'd like to bring up," Brady said. I froze just long enough for everyone to notice. "Go ahead," I said, my tone even. Brady glanced around. "We're concerned about some of the decisions you've been making lately." I raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "Well, Tina jumped in the painting classes, the bookstore investment ignoring our calls, refusing to discuss the house," Brady added. "Your finances. They were building their case. Together. Like a prosecution team rehearsed in the car ride over. Then came the kicker. We think," Brady said slowly, "it might be time to consider assigning someone a power of attorney." I heard Caleb's coffee cup touch the saucer. Deliberate. Controlled. A soft pause. I looked at Brady. "You think I'm losing capacity?" He held up his hands. No. Just being proactive. You're not getting younger, Mom. I'm 66, not senile. Of course. But you've always trusted me, and I just want to help manage things. Manage me, I corrected. Silence. And then I smiled. I stood up. Not abruptly, not theatrically, just decisively. I looked around the table. "To clarify," I said, "you're suggesting I hand over legal authority for my life to the same people who once labeled me the old lady who pays for everything." On a name tag. Tina flushed. That was a joke. It was a message, I said calmly, and I received it loud and clear. Brady pushed back his chair. "So you're saying no? I'm saying this conversation is over." He scoffed. "Wow. Okay. I guess we're just the villains now." I looked him square in the eyes. "No, Brady. You cast yourself in that role. You're just upset I stopped playing along." Then it happened. Martin, bless him, cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, "there's something I would like to clarify since the issue of legal capacity was raised." Brady frowned. "This isn't a legal matter." "Oh," Martin replied, "but it is." He pulled a small envelope from his leather folder and placed it neatly beside his plate. I saw Brady's jaw twitch. "You see," Martin continued, "your father anticipated this possibility before he passed. He added a specific clause to his will, a codicil empowering Mrs. Harrison to disinherit any descendant who publicly humiliates, manipulates, or attempts to control her finances or residence without consent." A beat. No one moved. Brady laughed, but it cracked halfway through. "That's ridiculous. He would have told us." "He didn't need to," I said quietly. "He trusted me to know when it was time." Tina's voice was shrill now. "You're going to cut us off because of one comment. One dinner." "No," I said, setting down my fork. "I'm setting boundaries. You're free to respect them or not," Lila whispered. "Wait, does that mean I lose everything too?" Martin glanced at her. "You were present for many of the incidents, but you never instigated them. You also never defended her. That complicates things." Lila blinked. "I'm sorry, Grandma," she said. "I should have said something." I touched her hand. "We all make mistakes. The real question is whether we learn from them." Brady stood. "This is absurd." "No," I replied, rising with him. "This is overdue," Tina muttered. "Unbelievable. After everything we've done for you." "You mean everything I paid for," I corrected. Silence. They left in a flurry of anger and perfume. Evan helped clear the table. Mark offered to take out the trash. Lila hugged me, not tightly but sincerely. Caleb stayed behind. As he stood to go, he said, "You know Robert was right about you." I looked at him. "He always said, Margot may look gentle, but she knows exactly when to strike." I nodded. "That's because I learned from the best." That night I updated my will, not out of vengeance, but out of peace. Brady and Tina were no longer included. Evan was now co-executor. The bookstore fund was formalized. The house still mine would be protected in trust. And I slept. For the first time in years, I slept like someone who was no longer being taken from. The morning after the birthday dinner, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the remnants of cake crumbs and empty wine glasses like a general surveying a battlefield. It had been a war fought with smiles, suggestions, and soft words sharp as daggers. And somehow I had won not with fury, but with finality. The silence in the house was no longer heavy. It was earned, like the quiet that settles over a garden after a violent storm when the wind has ripped away everything that didn't have roots. The next week passed in a steady, measured rhythm. I returned to my watercolor classes. I began repainting the guest room, not because anyone would be staying there, but because I could. Because the room belonged to me, and no one else would define its use. I took long walks without checking my phone. I left Tina's texts unread. I deleted 3 voicemails from Brady without listening to a word. The more they tried to assert control, the more invisible they became to me. Control is funny that way. It only works if you acknowledge its existence. Evan visited the next weekend. He brought a stack of books on entrepreneurship, a rough draft of his business plan, and 2 croissants he admitted were from the gas station. I made us real coffee. I've been thinking about the store name, he said, unfolding his sketch of the layout. Something that reflects a beginning and legacy. What about chapter 1, I suggested. He looked at me surprised. That's perfect. Then a beat. Are you sure about this, Grandma, I mean? Helping me? I'm not helping you, I said. I'm investing in what comes next. He nodded slowly, and for the first time I saw in him the same fire Robert once had, quiet, steady, focused. A few days later, I stood outside a small Victorian building just off Main Street. The paint was chipped, the windows needed replacing, but I could see its shelves of books, the smell of coffee, a space that breathed welcome. Evan met me there. We walked through it together, imagining light fixtures and reading nooks. This place has good bones, I said. So do we, he replied. Meanwhile, Brady and Tina tried a different tactic. Emails about reconciliation. A message from Tina peppered with praise and veiled desperation. We've been doing a lot of reflection, Margot. We miss you. We realize things got tense and we'd love to start fresh. Lila and Mark are looking at homes, and we'd be honored if you felt comfortable supporting them in any way. Only if you want to, of course. There it was, the mask of politeness stretched over the skull of entitlement. I didn't reply. Some messages deserve the dignity of silence. Lila, however, did something her parents never would. She showed up, unannounced, no makeup, no audience. She sat across from me on the porch and said, I know I didn't speak up when I should have. I thought silence made me safe. But I see now it just made me complicit. I said nothing for a long moment. Then I poured us both iced tea. Do you want to be different from them? I asked. I do. Then act differently. Not just here. Everywhere. She nodded. I'd like to visit more if that's okay. It is, I said. But understand this house is no longer neutral ground. It belongs to truth. She understood. I could tell. Evan and I moved forward with the bookstore. He handled paperwork, permits, and renovation bids. I oversaw the budget. It felt strange, liberating even to be building something for the future, instead of preserving the past. For so long, I had poured myself into family events, photos on the mantle, traditions they no longer respected. Now I was planting something entirely new. One day, as we painted the interior walls a warm shade of parchment cream, Evan turned to me and said, You seem lighter. I am, I said. It turns out the weight I was carrying wasn't grief. It was an expectation. On the day we installed the shelves, I received a certified letter from a law office in Florida, Brady's new address. They were exploring legal clarification regarding power of attorney and questions of Margot's capacity to make financial decisions. It was clumsy, a bluff, one last grab before the walls came down. I called Caleb. He chuckled. "They're trying to shake the tree," he said. "But they forget it's not their tree." "I'm not worried," I told him. And I wasn't. 6 weeks after the birthday dinner, Chapter 1 had its soft opening. Evan served coffee behind the counter. A small group of neighbors came in, some to browse, some to congratulate him. I stood near the mural I painted, a forest of open books and hidden stories. People smiled at it. Kids pointed. One woman asked, "Who did this?" An old lady who finally stopped paying for everything I said. She laughed, but I meant it. That night, Evan and I sat outside under the string lights he had installed. He handed me a card. Inside he had written, "Thank you for giving me more than money. You gave me a door I could walk through with pride." I felt something shift in my chest. Not sadness, not anger, just release. The next morning I received a message from Lila. "Grandma, I was wondering if you'd help me learn to paint." I replied, "Come by Saturday. We'll start with how to mix light." And just like that, a different kind of legacy began. 3 weeks after the birthday dinner, my house was quiet again. Not quiet in the way that loneliness sounds, but a stillness that tasted like reclaimed space. There were no more calls from Tina echoing through the living room. No more casual pop-ins from Brady with a half embrace and a veiled request that always began with, "Mom, do you think you could just—" No more guilt-wrapped manipulation disguised as family concern. Just me. And silence. A silence more valuable than any piece of real estate they hoped to inherit. I began waking up early, brewing mint tea, watering the roses in the side yard. Then 2 hours of watercolor classes at the local community center, surrounded by women who had survived lifetimes and didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. No one asked what I did or what I owned. They only cared how freely I let the color move on paper. At the studio, I wasn't Margot the matriarch. I was a woman discovering how to let her hand tremble and still call it art. Evan came over every Saturday afternoon, sometimes with burnt muffins, sometimes with good coffee, always with a heart that asked for nothing. One Saturday, I placed a folder in front of him at the kitchen table. He looked up puzzled. Inside business license paperwork, a preliminary lease agreement, startup financials, and a letter from my financial advisor confirming a foundational investment. "What is this?" he asked. "The beginning," I said. "You mean, for the bookstore?" "No," I smiled. "For your story." He didn't speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I thought it was just a dream." "All dreams are," I replied, "until someone believes in them enough to write the first check." 2 weeks later, a sign went up on Main Street. Chapter 1. A refurbished Victorian storefront. Inside, shelves still smelling of pine, warm lighting a corner cafe. On one wall, a forest mural I painted, glowing lanterns among trees, books blooming like flowers. Evan stood in the middle of the empty shop, hands in his pockets. "What do you think they'll say?" "They won't say anything," I told him. "They'll count." He raised an eyebrow. I added, "The cost, the potential, the control they thought they had. They'll count what they've lost." I wasn't wrong. 3 days after the store opened, I received an email from Tina. "Hi, Margot. Hope you're doing well. We heard about Evan's store. We're so happy for him. On a related note, Lila and Mark are looking into buying their first home. If you feel open to supporting them in this milestone, they'd be incredibly grateful. Let us know when you're free to talk." Not a single acknowledgement of what had happened. No apology, no recognition of the wound. Just another veiled handout. I didn't respond. But then I got a message from Lila herself. "Hi, Grandma. I know my mom reached out. But I wanted to say something myself. I don't want you to think I'm like them. I know I stayed silent when I shouldn't have. Can I come over on Thursday? Not to ask for anything, just to talk. I let it sit for a few hours. Not because I was angry, because I needed to be sure it came from her heart, not from their script. Finally, I replied, I'll be home at 3 on Thursday. If you mean what you wrote, I'll be here. It rained that Thursday, light misty. Lila showed up in flats and a ponytail, no makeup, no designer anything. She stood at my door and said simply, I'm sorry. I stepped back without a word, left the door open. She came in. We sat in the kitchen. I poured tea. The room was quiet for nearly 5 minutes. Then she began, I saw what happened. I saw what they said, what they did. And I said nothing. I wanted to believe I was neutral. But now I see. Silence is a choice. And I chose wrong. I nodded slowly. You saw. That means you had a choice. She didn't argue. Why are you here now? I asked. Because I want to be different. Because I saw what Evan is building. And I want that kind of life. Not one built on expectations and pressure and polite cruelty. I want to build something real. And I want to learn how. I studied her face. Not the girl in the wedding gown. Not the pawn in her parents' games. Just a young woman searching. Then start by learning the difference between access and intimacy. Between inheritance and integrity. She nodded. And we sipped our tea in quiet understanding. 2 weeks later, word reached me Brady had liquidated his stake in a failing business. The whispers were that he was trying to recover what he thought he had secured through charm and default. But charm doesn't hold up in court. And default means nothing when the gatekeeper no longer opens the gate. I didn't celebrate his misfortune. But I didn't mourn it either. Sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. It looks like silence. Like not answering when they finally realize they need you. That same night I walked past chapter 1. Evan was adjusting books in the front window. He waved when he saw me. I didn't go in, just nodded. Not all victories need witnesses. The next morning I met with Caleb. Not to rewrite my will, but to expand it. I created a new clause, a living fund managed by Evan, for community literacy programs and small scholarships for students in creative fields. I called it the Margot Key Fund. Because I wasn't just closing doors, I was building new ones. And deciding on my terms, who would walk through them. 2 days later, I received a small white envelope from Jennifer. Inside, a thank you note. No request, no pretense, just gratitude. It read, Grandma. Thank you for giving me time and space to figure things out. Mark and I are planning a quiet trip to Cape Cod. We used your gift to book a small cabin. It's perfect. I hope someday I can show you I've changed. With love, Jennifer. I smiled. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come with a trumpet. It comes with a whisper and a return address. The invitation arrived in cream-colored envelopes. Thick paper, embossed lettering. A tone of civility masks the blade beneath. Family estate meeting. Saturday, 3 p.m. Hosted at the law offices of Caleb Morse and Associates. There was no mistaking the purpose. This wasn't a brunch. It wasn't a reunion. It was the moment my late husband had prepared for in quiet confidence, and the one my son never thought would come. Brady likely believed this meeting would serve as a last-ditch effort to reframe himself. To spin his narrative before the ink dried. To charm. To posture. To maneuver. He forgot one thing: I wasn't just the audience anymore. I was the witness. The memory. And the executor of my resolve. I arrived precisely at 2:57 p.m. Caleb greeted me in the marble-floored lobby with a warm, steady handshake. They're already upstairs, he said. Shall we? I nodded, smoothed my coat, and followed him to the elevator. My breath was even. My hands calm. I had prepared for this not with spite, but with stillness. The kind that settles in a person who has already made peace with the truth. When we stepped into the boardroom, they turned to look. Brady in a navy blazer too tight at the collar. Tina with a folder on her lap and a mask of courtesy glued to her face. Jennifer and Mark hands folded. Lila sitting beside Evan. Evan didn't look nervous. He looked ready. Caleb took his seat at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming," he began. "Today we'll be reviewing amendments made to the estate of Robert Harrison, as well as documents updated within the last 6 months." Brady interrupted. "Why now?" Caleb didn't flinch. "Because it's time." He opened a folder, removed a single sheet of paper, held it between his fingers like a gavel without needing to strike. This document is known as a codicil, a supplemental clause Robert added before his passing. It has legal standing and was signed in the presence of 2 witnesses and a notary. Tina shifted. "We've already gone through the will," Caleb continued. "The codicil addresses one specific condition: how Margot Harrison is to be treated following Robert's death. Should any descendant be found to publicly humiliate, attempt to manipulate or control her, especially regarding her finances, they will forfeit all rights to their inheritance." The room froze. Brady's expression cracked just slightly. A twitch of the jaw. This clause was enacted following documented incidents, Caleb said, sliding forward a sealed envelope. "Margot has chosen to provide evidence and testimonies of such events, including the name tag incident, attempts to assign her financial commitments publicly, and pressure to vacate her home." Tina scoffed. "Those were misunderstandings." "No," I said clearly. "They were patterns." Jennifer sat upright. "Am I included in that?" Caleb glanced at his notes. "You were present, but your involvement did not constitute active harm. Your inheritance remains unchanged." Jennifer exhaled, her eyes flickering to mine. "Thank you," she whispered. Lila reached under the table and took her hand. Brady stood suddenly. "This is a trap. You manipulated Dad. You had him write this." Brady Caleb interrupted. "This clause was initiated by Robert, not Margot, and the original is in his handwriting." Brady's mouth opened then closed. "This isn't about you losing money," I said, voice steady. "It's about me reclaiming dignity, something you treated like a negotiable item." "You think this is fair?" Tina hissed. "No," I said. "Fair would have been not needing this meeting at all." Caleb handed out updated copies of the distribution plan. Brady's and Tina's names were absent. Evan has been added. Half of Robert's remaining estate was redirected into the Margot Key Fund. The rest were divided among those who had demonstrated care, not just bloodline. Jennifer, Lila, Evan, not as rewards, but as acknowledgments. Brady looked at me. Not furious. Wounded. Small. "You were always going to cut us off," he muttered. "No," I replied. "You did that yourself. I simply signed the dotted line." The meeting ended in silence. As they filed out, Caleb touched my elbow. "Are you ready for what comes next?" I smiled. "It's already here." The Monday after the will reading, I walked through my garden barefoot. Morning dew kissed the soles of my feet. The rosemary had started to bloom again, small, defiant, fragrant reminders that some things survive even after seasons of neglect. That's how I felt. Not triumphant, not bitter, just growing again. I hadn't spoken to Brady or Tina since the meeting. I didn't expect to. But the world has a way of forcing collisions when people refuse to learn through distance. And sure enough, it happened. Wednesday afternoon. I was restocking watercolor supplies in the sunroom when I saw Tina's car pull into the driveway. Brady got out on the passenger side. No knock, just the door flung open and footsteps marched in like they still lived here. "Mom," he called out, "we need to talk." I didn't turn from the shelf. "If it's about the will, you'll need to schedule something with Caleb." "No." Tina's voice chimed in, syrupy but brittle. "It's about everything, about what you're doing to this family." I faced them fully. "What am I doing?" Brady's face was red. "You blindsided us, Mom. You humiliated us in front of everyone. You've made us look like parasites." I tilted my head. "If you're worried about appearances, perhaps ask yourselves what made them true." We gave you our lives, Tina snapped. We supported you through Robert's death, brought the family together for holidays, and took care of you. No, I said evenly. You invited me to events you orchestrated for control. You wrapped exploitation in the disguise of tradition. And you didn't take care of me, you took advantage of my silence. Brady ran a hand through his hair. You want to cut us off, fine. But don't act like you didn't enjoy it. Don't pretend this wasn't about punishing us. I stepped closer. This wasn't punishment. It was recognition of what was and what can no longer be. They didn't stay long. There's not much to argue when your power depends on access, and the locks have changed. As they left, Tina paused at the threshold. You'll regret this. Families don't survive on pride. No, I said softly. They don't survive on entitlement either. And I closed the door. This time I didn't look through the curtain. That night I wrote 3 letters. One to Evan confirming the first disbursement for his bookstore's expansion. One to Jennifer offering a personal grant if she wished to go back to school on her terms. And one to myself. Not a journal entry. A declaration: I am not the silence you fill with your expectations. I am the space you no longer occupy. I am not your benefactor. I am my beginning. I placed that one on my nightstand, because even strength needs reminding. A week later, I heard from Lila. She had begun volunteering at a local art co-op. Said it made her feel awake in a way she hadn't since college. She invited me to come speak. About painting, but also about boundaries. Not everyone needs to hear it, she said, but the right ones do. At the event, I stood in front of 15 women. Some are younger than Lila, some are older than me. I didn't prepare a speech. I told a story. About being called the old lady who paid for everything. About the name tag. About the silence that came after. And how I used that silence to plant a garden, to paint, to fund dreams that had integrity, to say no clearly, kindly, finally. When I finished, one woman stood up and said, "You weren't invisible. They just didn't look close enough." I nodded, which is why I stopped waiting to be seen. I started drawing the line instead. It began with a phone call from Caleb. "Margot," he said, his voice tighter than usual. "There's one more document Robert left behind. A final envelope. It wasn't meant to be opened unless a particular condition was triggered." "And has it?" I asked calmly. "It has. Based on Brady's attempt to dispute the codicil and his recent filing in family court, I didn't need to hear the rest. Robert saw this coming. When I arrived at Caleb's office, there was no fanfare, no audience, just a manila folder on the desk aged at the edges with my name in Robert's unmistakable cursive. He titled it Contingency D. Inside was a letter, not legal, personal. "My dearest Margot, if you're reading this, then something I feared has come to pass. I hoped it never would. But you know me, I never trusted hope unless it was backed by a plan. If Brady has tried to fight the codicil or question your mental capacity or demand control over anything meant to be yours, then this letter triggers the documents in the envelope below. You'll find a deed transfer, a private trust conversion, and most importantly, a video. I recorded it because I wanted our children to hear it from me, not just see it on paper. Whatever happens, know this. I built our fortune with you, not for them. If they've disrespected you, they've disqualified themselves. With all my love and my final word, Robert." Caleb inserted a USB into the computer. And there he was. Robert sitting in his home office, tie loosened, eyes clear, voice strong. "Brady, if you're watching this, it means you've disappointed me in the exact way I feared you might. Entitlement is not a birthright. It's a flaw. And Margot has always been the one who gave without asking. So if you ever make her feel small, make no mistake, I will take from you everything I built." He paused. "Tina, if you encouraged him, you're no better. My legacy is not for decorators and brunchers." He turned to the camera. "And to my grandchildren, if you're watching this, it means your future is now in your own hands. Treat your grandmother with kindness, and the door stays open. but disrespect her, and it shuts. Permanently. The screen went black. Caleb looked at me. This changes everything. I nodded. No. It confirms everything. The next week, a second family meeting was called not by me, but by Caleb, this time at a neutral venue. Brady and Tina arrived, tense lips, thin eyes darting. Evan, Lila, and Jennifer came with quiet resolve. Caleb began without preamble. A final clause in Robert's estate has now been enacted. It supersedes prior distributions. It's legally airtight, and it is enforceable immediately. He paused. A new trust has been formed, one in Margot's name. The family home, the Florida investment property, the remaining stocks all consolidated under her sole authority. She may at her discretion appoint successors or withhold entirely. Brady stood. That's not fair. Caleb pressed play. Robert's voice filled the room. Brady sat back down. Tina cried. Jennifer blinked hard. Lila exhaled deeply. Evan reached over and took my hand. It was done. Not because I needed vengeance, but because justice, when done right, doesn't scream. It simply stays standing after everything else has fallen. In the months that followed, the bookstore doubled in community visitors. We launched a monthly reading series and funded 3 literacy scholarships in Robert's name. Evan's project became our shared legacy. Jennifer enrolled in a graduate program in creative therapy. Lila began mentoring teens at the art co-op. And I traveled to Paris, alone. I walked through museums without having to explain myself to anyone. I stood on the Pont Alexandre III and dropped a folded piece of paper into the Seine. On it, written in my hand, "You didn't die, Robert. You prepared." And I finally listened. 1 year to the day since the name tag, we held a garden party. Not a grand one, just enough people to fill the yard with laughter. The sign above the gate read, "Chapter 1, Year 2 begins." Near the roses, Evan unveiled a small plaque in honor of Margot Harrison, the woman who opened the door. I didn't cry, but I felt him there, and I smiled. Sometimes justice takes time, not with rage, not with fire, but with planning, boundaries, and love that leaves instructions. To every woman who's ever been overlooked, used, or laughed off as just the one who pays for everything, know this. You are not invisible. You are the foundation they forgot to thank. You are allowed to close the door. You are allowed to start again. Thank you for walking with me through this story. If it moved you, share it. Leave a comment with the city you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this message has reached. And if you've ever felt like Margot, it's not too late to write your own chapter 1.